Hello, and thanks for joining us again. This is the next segment of Immigration News and Views, and I have with me today Felicia Zeidman, one of the attorneys in our office, and Felicia and I have been recently brought into many I-9 audits. What is an I-9 audit, Felicia? What exactly is that? Maybe we can let our viewers know.
Well, the government's interested in confirming that you, the employer, have proper I-9 documentation for all of your workers. An I-9 form itself records specific information about the worker, but the thrust of the document is to confirm that the person is who they say they are and that they're authorized to work here in the United States. So there are in one part of the form, there's sections where identification has to be recorded, which will have been presented to the employer. That identification has to be recorded that provides work authorization for that worker. The person from the employer's office who's recording the information also has to make a small attestation that they could later be asked about, proving that they actually monitored the person's documentation, looked at it, recorded it, and ensured that that person was basically able to work here in the United States.
And this process is called the employment verification process, and it really is the precipice between the labor laws in the United States and the immigration laws. And that's why it's really important for you as employers to know about the I-9 form. You also need to know the I-9 form was recently updated. We just recently received the updated form, and you have to make sure that you're using the most recent I-9 form. Now, we have been brought in, we as a firm have been brought into many I-9 audits and investigations where the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has actually come in and served employers with notices asking to see their I-9s. And usually the way that that works is that within 3 business days, an employer is required to turn over their I-9s to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Officer. And then what they do is they embark on what's called an audit. And then what happens is during this audit, there are auditors who work for the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office. And what they'll do is they look over the I-9s, and then what they do is they report to the employer whether or not those I-9s were properly filled out. So this is not a difficult form. It's a 3-page form now. Right, exactly. Well, and so tell our viewers why that's why we're smiling after pointing that out.
Well, theoretically, it's not a difficult form, but it has been called the most difficult 2-page form in all of immigration forms. Right. And there are a lot of immigration forms.
So there are a lot of nuances involved
That's right.
in the immigration process and employment verification.
The other really important piece about this is the potential fines that you could get for it. So although it may not appear to be a complex form or to be a complex idea, the fact that you could be looking at, you, the employer, could be looking at fines of $1,000, $1,200 per poorly documented worker is enough to put employers on the alert that they must perform the checking process and fill the I-9 out properly.
So this whole process actually comes under Section 274 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, and the INA has multiple bases for liability, one of which is, and this is what we're talking about here, is what are called paperwork violations. Failures to fill out the I-9 form properly. But there's also knowing hire violations, whether an employer knowingly hired an individual or whether an employer knowingly retained an individual. And this is the liability that we see a lot, where employers have I-9s on file or they have them, and that's another thing we can talk about, of course, is where they should be filing these documents. But that they have these I-9s filled out, but then what they did is they failed to update them when the employee's employment verification expired. And that's a big problem too.
Right, and another problem may be that the type of identification is not recorded properly on the document. We've seen that create significant liability for our clients. And other types of issues are dating issues, putting the proper dating, getting the information onto that form within 3 days of hire. There's a lot of questions about how to define the date of hire for some people. What sorts of problems do you think, David, come up the most in your experience with these forms?
Well, probably the biggest problem is that the employers are not filling out the I-9s within 3 business days. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the employees are not on site, they're off site. So what kind of fixes can be put in place? Well, there's a notarization type of process, and we can obviously instruct our clients on how to do it that way. We oftentimes tell our clients, of course, have the individuals visit the place, the home office, and do it in person and make a copy of the documents that the individual shows and keep that copy of the documents, a nice clear copy, of course,
Yeah.
with the I-9 form. And that, of course, will be able to help the employer to mitigate potential liabilities using what's called the good faith defense, which was a defense that was written into the law back in 1996 that gave employers the opportunity to mitigate potential liability paperwork violations if they were non-technical violations.
I just want to interrupt you for a minute to talk about that idea of good faith. Most of us, when we deal with the government, the IRS, or any government agency, we expect that our best efforts are going to count for something. And, you know, it's true that government has a duty of transparency and a duty, let's say, to look at the entire situation that they are confronted with. But a good faith defense is not always available. And I think that's an important point, is that within the context of these I-9 forms, the good faith defense has significant parameters. So while you may feel when you go to sleep at night as the employer that you've made your best efforts to do your best, you have to really make sure that you have been within the law. In other words, best efforts just do not always cut it in this case.
It's an excellent point, Felicia. With that, what I'd like to do is encourage our viewers, if you have any questions at all about the I-9 process or I-9 audits or I-9 investigations, please feel free to email us at the email address that you'll see on your screen. Our address, our office address, and telephone number is also on the screen. You can feel free to contact us if you have any questions at all about the employment verification process, about I-9s, or about E-Verify or Social Security mismatches. This is a service that our firm provides to employer clients, and we're more than happy to assist you. Thank you so much for being with us today, Felicia. I appreciate I appreciate your coming on with me and helping to discuss I-9s. I have a feeling that this is not the last segment that we're going to do about I-9s for our employer clients.
Things are changing every day, so hopefully we'll see everybody in this spot soon and be able to give an update.
Thanks so much. Bye now.
Bye-bye.